Hi, I'm Kate Warren, Director of Global Recruitment Services at Dfid, and welcome to my weekly Career Matters video blog. So recently I discussed the importance of reviewing qualifications when applying for an international development job. And I got a few comments, and I wanted to respond to one in particular. Gabe, who wrote, "You say minimum years is often less negotiable, but I've had other people tell me otherwise. I have an advanced degree with only 2 years of relevant professional experience. My frustration comes from many seemingly entry-level positions that require 5 years of experience. I've generally applied for these positions anyway, but my 0 success rate leads me to think you may be correct. What do you suggest?" So this is a very relevant issue for many people out there. They just don't meet those minimum qualifications that are often very much specified within an international development job posting. So to break down kind of the very many facets of this issue, I think it's important to examine why organizations have such high level of expertise and criteria and requirements for the jobs that they advertise, and then discuss some tips for overcoming them. So the first reason is a lot of times these requirements are passed down from a funding agency. So if you're looking at jobs with an implementing organization, so maybe an NGO or a consulting firm that's implementing projects on behalf of a donor like USAID or Dfid or European Commission. Oftentimes these positions are coming from terms of references that the donors provide and require that all of these boxes be ticked as far as years of experience, education, very specific criteria. And for these hiring organizations, they don't have a lot of leeway or flexibility in this. So even though they might want to hire you, they can't, because their donor will not allow them to, or in the funding stage, if they're submitting a proposal, they risk losing an entire project, maybe millions of dollars in funding over the personnel that they propose. And if you don't fit all of the right criteria that the donor specified, then they're not going to be best positioned to win that project. So oftentimes employers feel that they are looking for the best resume for a position rather than actually the best person to implement it, which is a challenge both for them and for you as a job seeker. But it's kind of a reality of how the system is set up currently. I hear from recruiters that things are changing and that they're seeing that there's more openness and willingness to explore people who have different backgrounds and experience. But for now, that tends to be a challenge with a lot of different organizations. So how do you overcome that? Well, for job seekers who don't have a lot of years experience, I just don't recommend focusing on some of those donor-funded project positions, particularly at the proposal stage, because it'll be even more crucial. Sometimes when an organization's already won a project and are working with the donor, they can be a little more flexible on those terms. But even still, oftentimes that donor has to approve the resume of the person they want to hire. So I would look instead at home office positions, positions that are paid via overhead that aren't tied to a specific project. That's where employers will have more flexibility and kind of exploring candidates that might not necessarily check all of those boxes in their list of requirements, including years of experience. And say the other reason is just for efficiency and objectivity. So particularly if you're looking at these donor agencies or funding agencies or like the UN, large institutions like this, they sometimes receive thousands of applications for a job. So in order to be able to efficiently go through them and shortlist them to find the candidates they even want to invite for an interview or further screening, they need to find an efficient way to do so. And so setting up clear criteria is a good way to do that for them, and makes it very easy for them to segregate people from a short list versus the long list. The other reason really is for transparency and having an objective way of hiring. So these institutions are usually publicly funded. Sometimes for some of these multilaterals, there's many different constituents, different countries that are funding, and they're all fighting to have employees hired from their country. And so they really need to have an objective way of evaluating the candidates. And so setting up some hard parameters about years of experience, education is one way of doing that. I think that it's up for debate if that's the best way, but it kind of is the way that it is set up now. And so it can be a challenge if you're trying to break into one of these large institutions and you don't meet that minimum bar. So one thing is, again, maybe these aren't the best institutions to look at if you don't yet meet that minimum criteria, because they might not be as flexible in their terms. But also a lot of these institutions have entry-level or junior professional programs, so depending where you are in your career. They're also highly competitive, so it's not an easy entrance point, but it is one way to get in. And I would say that also just being very well networked will help. So a lot of these institutions, they don't only hire full-time staff, they also hire consultants. And that tends to be through more informal hiring processes, who you know, knowing someone, and it might be more based on relationships than your exact resume. Again, I'll let you leave in comments your opinions on that, but that tends to be the reality of it. So you might want to look at really building that network and trying to go through informal channels. Another reason would just be limiting risk. So foreign aid projects are really not set up to absorb a lot of risk. There's tight budgets, quick turnarounds of working in very fragile economies, very serious complex issues. And so an employer is looking to staff for a project, they are going to look for someone that has already had experience performing well in that kind of environment. They're not really incentivized to take a risk on someone who hasn't worked in that kind of environment before. They're concerned about maybe, if you haven't worked in the field, for example, that it might just be too much for you. You might leave mid-project, which could really disrupt the project and impact the results of it. Maybe you won't be able to make some of those quick on-the-ground decisions as wisely as someone with more experience. Again, that could really impact the effectiveness of the program. So these are concerns that they have. And not to say that experienced professionals won't leave early or make wrong decisions, and that they definitely are missing out on some new blood and talent and ideas. But just when they're weighing their options, they are really trying to minimize their risk. So that's kind of how the employer looks at it when they are trying to decide who to hire for a position. So again, this is why, and a lot of people recommend starting out your career doing volunteer or internship programs. This kind of allows an organization to test drive you, or if you don't want to work with specifically that organization, you have some referrals and references to show that you perform well in that kind of context. So doing volunteer or internship programs can kind of help you prove to employer that you are a known and proven commodity, and that you've worked well and performed well in that kind of environment before. So look for those kind of opportunities first. Another reason for this is organizations in international development just aren't able to provide the training that maybe other industries can. So say you are really eager, willing to take it on, willing to learn, you're a quick learner, and would really hope an organization to just be able to invest in some training to get you up to speed. And while that would be fantastic, a lot of organizations just don't have the budget to do so. And the way that the funding is set up is very project-based. So if you're wanting to look for work for an NGO or consulting firm, they're more focused on their immediate needs of that project. And consultants or even staff move around quite a bit. So you might be working for one NGO this year, but when that project ends, you're working for a different one next year. So they don't have employees stay with them long enough sometimes to really see that return on their investment and really investing in a lot of training. So that's one issue there. Another is just given the quick startup nature of projects, be it in a disaster crisis environment, or just because there tends to be, because of the way funding works, quick startup projects, they really need somebody who's trained, ready to go from the get-go. They won't necessarily have the time to help train and get you up to speed, so they need somebody who can hit the ground running in a sense. There are, I would say, some institutions, though, that do invest more in training. So those larger groups like the UN, where people tend to build a career within one institution, they really see the return on their investment in investing in training for their employees. So if that's something you're looking for, I would look at some of those larger institutions. Again, consider maybe within entry-level programs to break in. Some NGOs, consulting firms are investing more in it. So not to say that they don't, it's just that realize that their hands can sometimes be a little bit tied. Another thing is to try to get some training on your own. So really talk to professionals that work in your area of expertise or whose careers you admire and want to emulate, and find out what trainings would be really valuable and important. You don't want to waste a lot of time and money with training or certifications that really won't boost your resume. So try to really get some honest feedback from people whose opinions you value to see if certain trainings would be worth your own time and money to invest in to kind of boost your credentials there. So I would say that, you know, it's very hard to break past this minimum qualifications challenge. And so some of the tips here I think can help get you started. I would also really appreciate any of you adding your own comments about your own experience getting past this hurdle of not having enough years of experience or those minimum qualifications, and kind of how you were able to break in. I mean, many professionals do, so it is possible. It just probably takes a lot of tenacity and persistence and patience. So thank you for joining me for my Career Matters video blog. If you have any questions about managing your career in international development, please tweet me at DevX Careers. Thank you.